Why didn't I just use the horse mask as my avatar? The horse makes sense. I'm making a horse game. That's what people see on my YouTube. I could have just made a little guy that has the funny horse mask for a head, and people would have got that. It would have been fine. Instead, I made myself this cone head guy. This doesn't even... What even is this? Cone guy? Name shift? This doesn't make any sense. Hey, I mean, it's okay. You're not going to be working on the horse game forever, right? You'll eventually be making other games after this one is done, so you couldn't be horse dev forever. Yeah, I guess so, right? I mean, that's true. You're going to finish this game, right? Well, I mean, you're going to finish it, right? Hey, new devlog update for the funny horses. But first, a little preamble. If you follow me literally anywhere outside of YouTube, like Twitch, where I stream Gamedev live, Twitter, Blue Sky, or Patreon, you see a different name there than here. Nameshift or Nameshift Games. And if you've been a good little YouTube viewer and stick around for the entirety of a video, you might have seen that in the little outro end page too. I didn't ever have like a super solid identity / moniker as a game developer online. Even when I started putting my projects up on itch and stuff several years ago, I just came up with a random name and it never really felt right or made sense. But when I started making devlogs, I wanted to try and figure out something that would be a bit more, I don't know, workable. My username used to be Dick Venus for years when this channel was just an unserious dumpster for completely random video ideas, with no plan or coherency whatsoever. But then I put my first devlogs out and I didn't want to be called that anymore, obviously, and people were actually starting to see my videos. So I had to come up with something fast, so I slapped down horse dev since I'm making a horse game. But that was kind of a panicky, split-second decision, and horse game isn't the end-all be-all for my creative goals. Eventually, that game will be a project of the past, and even if that is still a ways out, I don't want to have that dependency on my identity, coupling how I represent myself online to a singular project or idea. Anyway, Nameshift alludes to the fact that throughout my life, I've always struggled to find a name or a way of creating a translatable and shareable identity that made sense and was one that I felt comfortable embodying for any duration. And since I pivoted from lots of different hobbies, interests, and projects, I found myself constantly changing the way I represent myself, to the point where nothing ever felt correct. Except now, oddly enough, what I've been discovering only recently is when I find references to shapelessness or change, that actually feels more right. Mercuriality seems to be something that resonates with me. So that's what Nameshift means to me, that my form is ever-changing and indefinite, and that I'm fickle and can't ever find a good name for anything that sticks, especially not a name for myself. Anyway, after this video goes out, I will be changing my YouTube page from HorseDev to Nameshift. That will happen sometime soon. If you're watching this in the future, hopefully this is stuck and my name is still Nameshift. Okay, great. Now let's talk about what I've been working on lately. A bit of a small update is a revamp on the inventory UI, fixing bugs, improving usability, and dialing in the overall style and functionality. Working on the wagon game earlier this year for the Cool Cats Jam turned out to be an awesome sandbox for making huge improvements in my UI implementations, so I'm bringing over a lot of what I learned from that project and folding it into Horse Game. I already had the basic UI template designed in the deprecated version and started putting it together in the rebuild, but at first this only allowed the player to see their own items. You couldn't yet interact with other inventories or do anything with the items yet. So I expanded this to include trading, which covers trading between either yourself and an NPC or a container. NPCs and containers simply need an inventory component to hold items and become tradable, and just need an interaction component to handle the input to bring up the GUI. Persistence between scenes and saves is already taken care of via the component. And speaking of usability, when exchanging a bulk of items, we use this little modal window to select the quantity. One of the things I picked up in my study of UI design is keyboard modifiers for UI interactions. So for example, in this window you can increment the amount up and down, or type in a value, but you can also hold Shift to increment by 5s, Alt to increment 10s, and Control to set min or max. Additionally, if you hold Control on the trade button, it will attempt the trade on the maximum amount possible, skipping the quantity modal entirely. Speaking of inventory, I talked a lot about my inventory and item system in my original horse game post-mortem video, and I spent a lot of time analyzing why my first attempt was poorly designed and the problems that arose from my own mistakes. But I want to take some time here to address something in the video that I've been wanting to talk about for a while now, and something that I got wrong. Yes, that's right. I got something wrong.
Wrong.
It might be hard to believe, but I am not in fact an infallible, perfectly omniscient entity partaking in the ultra-divine ordinance of creation and truth, mandate of the pleromic Godhead. I am but a tainted spawn of the false archon, procreating and proliferating the very medium of the duplicitous simulacra. What? Well, not really wrong per se, but I had a really poor choice of words when describing the way I set up my inventory system. In that video, I talked about using what I called a resource-based inventory system. Keep in mind, that video was made in 2023 and released in 2024. So it was quite some time ago. At the time that I made that video, I didn't know that resource was actually its own thing in Godot. So I really want to make it clear I was not talking about a capital R resource in that video, and that's my mistake. I was using the term more generically to describe a packaged representation of an object in the game, and something more analogous to a packed scene in Godot or like a prefab in Unity. Because a capital R resource is just a class for creating custom data containers, and is absolutely the kind of thing that is perfect for making a system for items and inventories. Resources in Godot are analogous to scriptable objects in Unity. They're extremely powerful and useful in so many different situations. I hope that clears that up, because that has been bugging me for a while. The main takeaway I wanted people to have is you should maintain a degree of separation between the data for something like an item and the objects you instantiate to represent that item in various contexts, such as a list item object for representing and interacting with an item when in an inventory GUI, or the physics object that gets loaded into the scene when you equip an item. These can all be designed in decoupled modular ways, and that's the lesson I wanted to impart. And I believe in object-oriented design, this relates to something called the single responsibility principle. So yeah, resources in Godot are really great, and you can do lots of cool things with them, and they're useful. So that means you're gonna use resources for your item system, right? No. Instead, I'm gonna use resources to refactor my dialogue system. Yes, in the previous devlog, I talked about how I created a dialogue manager for my project called Meow, which is going to be a plugin bundled in the GatoBox game development template package. This plugin was conceived as a system for creating and editing dialogues using JSON, and provides a customizable template for displaying dialogue interactions on the screen, as well as lots of different data types and other useful things. I started this plugin from humble beginnings, with the goal in mind to just be able to write my dialogues as a simple JSON file, using a kind of shortcode system to control the logical flow of the given interaction. And that worked, which was cool, but it was weird. It was really complex and finicky to write dialogues in a linear text file and then parse them back in a dynamic branching way. And I found myself spending more and more time trying to handle bugs, edge cases, and writing crazy graph traversal logic to be able to handle more complex dialogues. Pretty early into the project, I created this flowchart editor, which was great, but it dawned on me that as soon as I had this editor, I never went back to writing the dialogues in JSON. So there was a lot of insane overhead to manage this system as it was, just to allow for the possibility of preserving this archaic workflow. So I thought, you know what? Let's just ditch JSON. Because let's be real, now that I have the editor, I'm never going to write one by hand again. If my timelines and dialogue blocks were resources, I could just program the functionality of the custom blocks and handle connections and navigating so much easier. I wouldn't even really need a parser, it would just be functional. Hit a block, do what the block does, go to the next block. Simple. And that's what I did. It was a bit of an undertaking, but in Meow 2.0, dialogue blocks and timelines are now a kind of branching linked list of resources. The code, so much cleaner. Way less buggy, and now it's way easier to maintain, change, and add new functionality to the system. JSON can be okay for quickly prototyping an idea, but lately I'm learning that in Godot, just use resources. With resource saver and resource loader singletons to handle saving and loading resources to and from the file system, I can't think of too many cases where you wouldn't just be better off using resource instead of JSON. Outside of a situation where you need to be loading and parsing like external data that for one reason or another has to be JSON, like a web application or something. So after the big refactor and bug fixes and adding the new mechanics I needed, the dialogue system is finally to the point where I can start implementing the bulk of the NPC interactions. So I've already started giving the player the first couple quests in the tutorial area, such as fetching items for NPCs. Things are looking good. My next video is probably going to be a comprehensive tutorial for this system, in part for posterity when it eventually goes live, but also for myself and team members to reference when we inevitably forget half the shit in here and have to return to fix something 4 months from now. One of the core features of this game is spells. Throughout the game, you, the player, unlock various spells that you can use to interact with the world, and importantly, the horses. First spell you learn is the simplest, punch spell. And the next, of course, is the lasso.
Giddy up.
One spell I recently worked on that involves some more refactoring was the charm spell. So how does this work? I don't actually know because I get all my game design ideas from a wizard that lives in a temple on top of a mountain in a country that doesn't exist, and we can only communicate through cryptic fever dreams. The charm spell is used to communicate with horses in something analogous to their native tongue. You interact with them by charming them with these moods. When the horse is born, it generates a temperament, which is a set of reactions to each of these types of moods, which will affect how your relationship with that horse changes when you attempt to charm them. The horses will interact with each other in a similar way and maintain lists of relationships with horses they've met and interacted with. Your relationship as well as pep will play a role in the capacity to which you can interact with, tame, and control horses you encounter and raise. Alright, it's time for some real talk. Did everyone watch the incrementals video? Because in that video, I proposed a problem and asked for help. The problem I was dealing with in that video was I wanted a way to index all the properties in a script as if they were an enum, so I could create ways of targeting those properties in the inspector for other tools and nodes. My hacky solution to do this was to create an actual enum every time I added a property to the script, and it worked. Kinda, but I didn't like that, so I posed the question to you guys, the audience, to see if we could get any bright ideas going. The crushing reality, however, is that everyone is just as stupid as me, and no one had any good ideas, and I think most of the people that tried to offer a solution just fundamentally didn't know what I was talking about, which meant that they also didn't know what they were talking about, which is mostly my fault because I don't know what I'm talking about. But luckily, I listened to my hunch, because I had a theory back then that the secrets to success were hidden in the mysteries of the get property list function. And I found a way to do this, and let me tell you guys, this is dark magic. I'm doing evil game design now with this. Check it out. Okay, so up until recently, I had all my items defined in a JSON file that I would load into the game as data and reference by name. As you already know from the amble earlier in this video, I'm migrating to a resources-first philosophy of how to structure data. So I did actually refactor my inventory and item system into a resource-based one. Our item class lets us create a record of an item with all the information necessary for it, including name, description, value, scale, and tags. We also have unstructured data for adding in extra stuff if we need, but I want to talk about tags. A tag is just a string, but you can do this cool thing called export enum. This lets you provide a list of hint strings as an enum that can be used to control what values are acceptable for this string in the inspector. And you can set the variable to be an array of this type, allowing you to easily assign from a consistent set of tags. But this is like the level 1 precursor to what I'm talking about. We're only just getting started. Because all of these item record resources are collected into an item collection resource, which is just a container for all the items we declare for the game. And we have a singleton called the item database, or itemdb for short, which simply loads this resource into memory and gives us methods to easily interact with the data and search for items. By giving this singleton the @tool keyword, we can have access to all the items in the game, not only at runtime, but also in the editor. So let's say I want to do something like create a drop table for all the fish that can be caught in a given water source. Oh, yeah. By the way, I added fishing to the game, but to be honest, I don't have time to talk about that right now, so we'll have to wait. By overriding the _get property list function, we can get a list of all the items we've created that contain the fish tag, and build an enumeration of them to export as the hint for a variable. Then we can create a resource to represent the selection of a given fish for a fish pool with a weight to control the random chance, or whatever else we need. But how is this possible? Well, it gets a little convoluted. Basically, for every property we have in our item record class, we have a setter method that emits the emit_changed signal. Objects in Godot use this signal to notify that their properties have been updated, which tells the editor to regrab the data they output via, you guessed it, the getPropertyList function. In the init function of the resource, which is going to run when the object is created, we connect that signal to our itemdb singleton. The method we're connecting it to simply updates the running dictionary with all the volatile item data that is usable from both within the editor and at runtime. Our items collection resource is also connected to this, so anytime we update not just the item record, but also the item collection, those changes will be captured and reflected accordingly. Lastly, we just need to give the @tool keyword to item record and items collection, and we're off. Now we can build all kinds of tools that interact with the items we create. For example, on the inventory component that entities in the game use, if I want to set the items that are already in it, I can fill out this array of item entries, which let me select from the list of items directly. This is it. This is what I was talking about. Yeah! But wait, hold on. I get that that's cool, but using it in this context to select items, I think that's a bad idea. Because depending on the size of your game, that list is going to become gigantic. Your collection of items is already long and disorganized, and once it becomes longer than the screen, reading from that dropdown just becomes a huge pain in the ass. Okay, smart guy, since you're Mr. Perfect, how would you propose we do it? Well, you've already got your items as resources. That means you can use these data objects in really straightforward ways. Stop overcomplicating it. Have a variation of item entry that lets you just drag and drop an item record into the list and set the amount. Since it's functionally the same, you can create a version of item entry that lets you provide a list of tags and filter down the drop-down selection to only items with a matching tag. Finally, the last thing I'm concerned about is the items collection. You have every item in the game in one gigantic unsorted list. Instead, you can create multiple item collection resources named after types of items like furniture, fish, mushrooms, etc., whatever you want, and then aggregate those into your item DB. I hate to admit it, but every once in a blue moon, you've got some pretty good ideas. Well, one of us has to think with their head on straight, because I know it's not going to be you. All right, I'm going to wrap things up here. I think we're about out of time for today. There's a whole lot more stuff to cover that I couldn't get to yet. Next time we'll talk about fishing, horse genealogy, hats and accessories, customization, and more. If you like this video, hit the like button and share, and please leave a comment below telling me your thoughts or any feedback or suggestions. I read every single comment, print them out, and pin them to my wall, especially the mean ones. If you like this and want to see more, hit subscribe. I also post small granular updates and progress to my social media on Twitter and Blue Sky, so follow me there if you want to see the random odd screenshot and webms of the development process. I also stream Gamedev on Twitch at twitch.tv/nameshiftgames. Tune in if you ever want to see how the sausage really gets made. Additionally, there's a Patreon if you want to chip in to support and help make sure that I can keep making these videos and these games. A big benefit to becoming a supporter is that you will get to become an NPC in the game. That's right, any and all Horse Game 2 beta tester tier supporters will be able to have themselves immortalized in the game forever, either as themselves or as an OC of their own design. You can have a short little epitaph, a full quest line, the sky's the limit. Links in the description to everything. Okay, I think that's it. Thanks for watching, y'all. Peace.